Welcome back to What is Going On with Stand with Meg, but today we're not talking about Megan because I need a break. Getting in that headspace was doing things to me, even just like rifling through those old memories, sending me to places we don't want to go. So I want to answer a question I find far more interesting is why am I a mostly functional person? What happened between me and Megan? The answer is therapy and lots of it. And so today I'm going to walk you through all the different kinds of therapy I've done over the years, give them all a rating, and then share what I've learned. All right, but what are my credentials? How do you know mostly functional person? So my first piece of evidence is that I am not on here asking for money. I don't have a GoFundMe. Every dollar earned from any of these videos is going to my local library. That is a very functional behavior. I am not asking for money. The next thing you need to know is if I needed money, I know where to get it because I'm employed. That's also a sign of somebody functioning in society. Next is I have 2 kids that most of y'all don't know anything about. And that's appropriate because this isn't about kids and I'm not going to use my kids to get views. The last thing, and this isn't the best evidence of functionality because you can do this and be deeply unfunctional, but I've been married for almost 11 years, okay? You don't get out of that without learning a few things. So let's talk about the different therapies I've tried. And at this point, you know this is how my brain works, so it's going to be in a handy dandy chart. So I figured out I was pretty non-functional in my early 20s, so like 2013. I was making a lot of dumb decisions. The first thing I did when I was really, really depressed, it's one of my favorite kinds of therapy. In 2014, I would do my first therapy called Dog. I would get a dog. His name was Trigger. He was the best. He passed a few years ago. Dog was probably the most effective therapy on keeping me on this planet. Because when things got tough and I wondered why I was here, Dog. Who's going to take care of Dog? Who's going to get out of bed and go take Dog out to go to the bathroom? Dog. Really good. I would give Dog like a 10 out of 10. And the thing I learned about myself when having Dog was I have a reason to be on Earth. If you're in a place where you're like, what's the kind of therapy I can afford in my life? Maybe consider Dog. The next kind of therapy I tried when things got really bleak was church. Now, I'm not going to shit on church. If you're excited for me to shit on church, you're in the wrong place. I will say, at the phase of where I was in my depression and anxiety, church was the wrong choice. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10. But here's why. I was severely depressed, and a friend of mine, very well-intentioned friend, said, I know what will help. I'll take you to church. That's what everyone tells me to do. So I go to church, severely depressed. He drags me out of my house. I go to church. I'm sitting there, and the sermon that day was, God has you exactly where you're supposed to be. So if you have something going on in your life, that's exactly where you're supposed to be. My stupid brain that was malfunctioning, we weren't functional yet, decided that meant that God wanted me dead. Oopsie, misunderstood that sermon. So we're going to give that a 2 out of 10. I learned at that moment that I needed to go to the hospital. So I would check myself into a psychiatric stay. I think I did a 3-day hold. God bless my friends and sister who got me there. But I checked myself in, and I would give a 3-day stay at a hospital a 5 out of 10. I want to give it a 0 out of 10 because it sucks so bad. It's not fun. I've never heard anyone be like, you know what? It was really relaxing going to a psychiatric facility. It was not. However, it was important because what did I learn from that stay? I need to keep my shit together so I don't have to go back. Because if I stopped keeping my shit together, I would have to go back to hospital. I did not enjoy hospital. Hospital was not fun. Trying to figure out the best way to deal with this glare. But if I close the window, you guys, it's so dark in here. Okay, next, I did talk therapy. This is your typical, tell me about your feelings. How do you feel about that? Tell me about your parents. Typical talk therapy. I would give that a 6 out of 10 because in that, I learned I have rights.
Did you know that you have rights? The Constitution says you do, and so do I.
This is where my therapist would give me my first exposure to something called the Personal Bill of Rights. If you've never seen it before, it's really important because up until this point in time, I thought everybody should just had the right to be shit to everybody and I should just expect that people are going to be shit to me. This is the first time I learned that I have a right to a safe space, that I have a right to my own opinion, I have the right to make my own choices. This was all news to me. This would kind of create boundary apocalypse of 2015 where I didn't invite many people to my wedding, which is why it doesn't have a higher score. Talk therapy is good. It's good. It also led me to CBT and DBT. This is cognitive behavioral therapy and dialect behavior therapy. This is good. This is like I have tools. So I would give CBD and DBT, what did I write down here? I'm going to give it like a 3 out of 10. I know that sounds really low, but here's the thing. CBT and DBT can be helpful if you were raised in a family where like you didn't learn how to be a human at all, but it's mostly gaslighting yourself into thinking you feel better than you do, okay? It doesn't address a lot of root issues, but it did teach me that I have tools. So this is all in 2014. Yeah, 2014, big year for me. Things would take a really positive turn in 2021. Where I would have a friend reach out to me. We'd be chatting on the phone. I had just had my first kid, and she was like, "Can I tell you something?" And I was like, "Yes." And she's like, "You sound really angry all the time." And I was like, "I am really angry all the time. I'm so angry." I was just like angry. I was angry at work. I was angry at home. I was just angry. And she said, "Would you be interested in meeting with my therapist? She does somatic therapy." So I tried somatic therapy. It's also called somatic experiencing therapy. There's a whole lot of books around it, so I got really into that. But basically, somatic therapy is I have feelings. So up until now, I had gotten really good at articulating my feelings and my rights. So like I have tools, I have rights, I have words, but I hadn't processed a lot of the trauma that had happened. I could give you a detailed list of the trauma I'd been through, but I didn't know what to do with it. It was all stuck in my body. Now, the good news is somatic therapy has kind of taken off. You've heard about it, like regulating your nervous system and all that. I did this kind of therapy. It's hard. It's hard. I give it a 10 out of 10, but this is not something you do and then go into a meeting. This is something you do for an hour and then you leave and you have to take a 3-hour nap to like process what you've just healed, okay? The cries I cried on these virtual calls with this woman named Candy, who's a saint, by the way, were some of the biggest, most life-changing moments for me. And once I kind of got used to the sensation of feeling my feelings, which kind of changed everything for me, because before it was like something bad would happen, 2 days later, I would get really sick, and I would be like, what's going on? And it would be, I had had a feeling, and I'd shoved it down, and then 2 days later, it rose up. Now, because of somatic therapy, when I have a feeling, it happens. Convenient, less convenient. Like I will cry if someone says something mean to me. It's a normal reaction. I just wasn't used to it. So I did somatic therapy. After that, I would get into something called internal family systems. I don't know why it has the world's longest name. I also call it IF. It's also called IFS. But it's essentially this idea that I have parts. So not only do I have feelings, but all of me is made out of different parts from my history. And there's actually a family system managing it. It sounds really complicated, but once you get into it, it's not. I recommend the book No Bad Parts. And it's essentially this idea that if I am, let's say my husband does something that pisses me off and I immediately start acting kind of like a disgruntled teenager, like I'm like yelling and I'm like slamming doors, that would be my like child part is now taking over running the show. That's not helpful. So we go in and we talk to that part. And sometimes, because of the internal family systems, she's actually there to defend somebody else. Weird. You have to ask her to sit down. You do all of this with your eyes closed like this, and it feels super weird and vulnerable, but if you have a good therapist, it's very doable. But you say things like, hey, would you mind sitting down, disgruntled teenager, so I can talk to the person behind you? And maybe the person behind you is a very sad teenager who just needs someone to listen to her. You listen to her, and you'll be amazed what happens, because when those parts get attention, they stop harassing you in other ways. That is largely 2021. So no bad parts and some research on somatics. Then in 2024, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I am a devastatingly independent person, which means I only ask for help if I can pay for it. So in 2024, I would kind of hit a weird spot in my career. And so I would look into exec coaching as per advice from someone at work. She was like, you have a lot of good energy. You're kind of a loose cannon. You should do something about that. Did I rate IFS? I didn't. I would give this is a freaking 12 out of 10. Love IFS. It's gentle, it's comforting, you get to talk to yourself. I like it. I liked IFS. A little less overwhelming than somatics. Anyway, this exec coach, I would reach out, I'd find this wonderful woman named Jamie who focuses on working with women in male-dominated fields as well as minorities in male-dominated fields. I loved it. It was tough. She used hypnosis. She uses tapping. She uses everything. She was throwing the book at me, but it was some of the best money I've ever spent was working with Jamie. So I would give Jamie like a 15 out of 10. Things are going to get out of hand here. But she also recommended a book pretty early on into our therapy. And she even said, I've never recommended this book to anybody before, but I think you might like it. And it's because we were talking about this behavior that I had that I couldn't explain. It wasn't benefiting me in any way, but I kept doing the behavior. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was like when I would talk to men at work, I would get really like weird and insecure, and like I always treated men differently than women, and I hated it. And she recommended a book. Bear with me. It's called Existential Kink. Hold on. I was also like, because I'm a purity culture girl. We don't use that word, okay? So she recommends Existential Kink, and I read it. And it's basically the idea that if there is a behavior or a pattern that you're repeating, it's because you're getting something out of it. And the best way to move through that is to admit that to yourself and get the pleasure out of it. Weird. I realized that I was like playing out a story that I wanted men to rescue me because that's what I was taught. So once I admitted that, the other one I learned is that I really like it when people are mean to me on TikTok. Like if somebody made a mean TikTok about me, I would go back and rewatch it. And I thought that was like, some people call it like emotionally cutting. Once I admitted that I was like kind of into it, like I liked watching it, made me feel things, then I would be like, oh, well, I don't need a hit of that right now. I'll come back and get it later. And it kind of resolved itself. It was kind of incredible when I just admitted, I'm kind of into it. I mentioned this previously. I like all attention, but especially negative attention. It fulfills some weird kink thing I got going on. This is a lot to know about me, you guys, but you're hanging in there. So with execs coaching is I kind of have some kinks I need to figure out, address, and work with. We all do. All right, coming to my most recent, which is in 2025, I started marriage counseling with my husband, and we found a therapist that uses Terry Real. I think he's going by Terrence now. Terry Real does marriage counseling. I want to give this a 2,000 out of 10. It is so good. And maybe we'll cover a little bit of it because I think it's so good. Terry taught me I have to find me to find relation. And I really wanted relation. After all of these years of feeling crazy and unmoored and lonely, I reached a place in my old age of 34 that like I really wanted to know how to connect to people. All of my like role models for connection were abundantly dysfunctional. My mom was narcissistic. Frankly, my dad was an enabler. He didn't know what to do. So I was just repeating those patterns, and I was tired of it. I wanted to feel like I could connect with the people that I love. I wanted to know how to have a conversation about my feelings without being like, So I'm going to teach you a little bit about what I learned in that therapy. All right, just a little bit more context is I ended up in marriage counseling because both me and my husband did. We've been married for 10 years at that point. We were good roommates. We kind of lost the ability to connect. We were fighting more and more. And I met up with my therapist at the time, the same woman that I did the somatics with. And I was like, listen, I'm really resenting my husband. Can you help me cry about it so I can forgive him and move on? Her response shook me to my core when she said, you either need to get intensive marriage therapy or you need to get a divorce. And I really don't care for therapists that don't speak their mind. And she spoke her mind. And I said, okay, queen, say less. Who do you recommend? She recommended this amazing man named Tom in Kansas City. If you want a list, I can get him to you. He is trained on this methodology, which we found really useful. Our therapist also uses somatics, also uses internal family systems, but this is like the framework that he teaches us on, both me and my husband, and we both have really resonated with it. So I'll post the book, whichever book. I don't know what book it comes out of. I paid a therapist to read those books for me. So this is the framework. I think they call it respectful living. I forget what this actual chart is called, but this is what I see in my head. So there's an X and Y axis. Up here we have grandiosity, which is I'm better than everyone else. And down here we have shame, which is I am worse than everybody else. Everybody else is better than me. Over here we have walled off, which is saying I keep everyone super far away. And we have boundaryless, where you've got your people pleasers. You've got people that do anything to be close to people. They have no sense of self. So the goal with this kind of therapy is to get here. Unfortunately, in conflict, most people find themselves somewhere here around the edges. I found out because there's a quiz. I took a little quiz that I'm over here. I am boundaryless and what's called one up, which is essentially saying I'm better than you, but I'm not walled off. I'm just going to stand in front of you and tell you everything that's bad about you, which worked really well because my husband is one down and boundaryless. So we would sit together in our boundarylessness and he would just listen to me tell him how mad I was at him. Super unhealthy. And what usually happens when somebody is in like a boundaryless, so let's say you've got, let's bring it back to like girlfriends. You've got a girlfriend and you will sit and listen to her talk about her shitty boyfriend for hours. And you'll just listen and listen and listen and listen. And you'll give her some advice and she doesn't take that advice. And instead of slowly becoming, you think, my friend is being such a dumb idiot, she needs to do what I'm saying. But you're staying in this boundarylessness. You're not saying things like, hey, can we talk about something else? Or hey, I need a break from this. You're not putting any boundaries into place. You flip and you go into walled off and grandiose, which is I'm better than you, stay away, and you ghost people. This is a very like, we call it boundaries, but I believe it's like this kind of toxic trend that our generation has gotten into where we just like ghost people, we just block people off, we go no contact before we even try to move this direction, which is to say, I'm not better than you, but I do have some boundaries. Because saying I'm better than you and I need so many boundaries, I'm not going to talk to you, things get really toxic. The other way this can happen is if you're down here where my husband spends a lot of time, which is I'm a piece of shit, I'm no good, anyone can say anything they want to me. They then will flip to I'm now going to avoid everybody. They're going to be walled off and one down. Again, this is just language to kind of articulate where you are on the scale and help you see, okay, so I am close to a friend. I'm not having any boundaries. What does boundaries mean? This is actually another good topic. So my therapist talks about it like this. If I'm in the center of this circle, boundaries are what I choose to let out and what I choose to let in. Did that right on the glare spot. So this includes how I speak to others is always at a minimum respectful living. I'm never saying anything shitty to others. And if someone's saying something shitty, I don't let that in either. And that also includes how I talk about myself. And so managing this inner circle of boundaries really informs kind of how you function in here and how we're all just trying to move into a place where we see everybody with love and we maintain strong boundaries and we don't flip from one side to the other. So there you go. That's what I've learned this year. I have really found this powerful. Please check out the book if you haven't. And yeah, this has been much better for my brain today to talk about than to talk about my shitty sister.